Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
It's our people unit, but you could also say it's a music unit today.
You sure could.
Yeah, we're going to focus on a very famous composer whose melodies are still around today. You'll often go by a store or restaurant. You can hear this beautiful piano music. And if you're a music student, and I was growing up, you'll recognize it immediately as being music from Chopin, Frédéric Chopin. I have a funny story, Tom. When I was in fourth grade, I changed my piano teacher, and she was significantly harder than my first piano teacher that I had in second grade and third grade. And one of the books she had us buy was just lots of Chopin pieces. And I remember she wanted me to start, and I picked up this book, and I go, oh, are we going to start with Chopin?
Uh-oh.
She was horrified. Chopin?
That's a major sin to pronounce the name of a composer wrong.
Yeah. So you'll often hear his name pronounced with that kind of French pronunciation where they drop the N at Chopin. But we're going to talk about him. First, though, we're going to read through today's lesson. Picture yourself leisurely strolling through a bookstore, exploring its vast collection while delicate piano music stimulates your senses. Who might the brilliant composer behind such melodies be? It is none other than Frédéric Chopin, a Polish composer and pianist who is widely regarded as one of the greatest musicians of the Romantic era. Born in Zelazowa Wola, Poland, Chopin displayed his remarkable musical competence from a tender age, ultimately flourishing in Paris, where he spent the majority of his life. After moving to Paris, he composed extensively and earned a prominent status in the city's musical scene. Not only did Chopin's compositions convey poetic and expressive qualities, but the majority of them were also specifically crafted for solo piano performances. Regarded as some of the most emotionally complex and technically demanding pieces ever written, these works genuinely distinguish Chopin from his contemporaries. One such masterpiece is the Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2. While the right hand weaves an exquisite tapestry of sound, it is complemented by the gentle accompaniment of the left. This charming nocturne establishes a calming atmosphere of reflection. While soaked in the style of the Romantic era, Chopin's compositions also exhibit nationalistic elements, with his Polish heritage profoundly influencing his music. His polonaises and mazurkas in particular derive inspiration from the rich history and folk music traditions of his homeland. Had it not been for his fragile health, Chopin might have achieved so much more in his career. Tragically, his life came to an early end at the age of 39 because of complications arising from tuberculosis. Yet his musical legacy lives on and has been inspiring generations of musicians and music lovers ever since.
Okay, everybody, it's time for us to explain the contents of our lesson. We're talking about the timeless melodies of Frédéric Chopin. Okay, now picture yourself leisurely strolling through a bookstore, exploring its vast collection while delicate piano music stimulates your senses. Indeed, this can happen sometimes if you go to a bookstore. They like to play kind of soft music, usually classical music, to put you in the mood to read books and to buy books and things like that. But in this case, you're in a bookstore and you hear some music playing and it stimulates your senses. Oh, what's that? I've heard that music before. Isn't it lovely? Well, who might the brilliant composer behind such melodies be? Indeed, they play different composers if they're playing music through their PA system or whatever, but it's none other than Frédéric Chopin, a Polish composer and pianist, or pianist, you can pronounce it both ways, who is widely regarded as one of the greatest musicians of the Romantic era. So again, we're talking about Chopin, and of course, you can hear his music in one particular place here in Taipei. We'll mention it later on. but you might be in a bookstore and you might hear his music. Of course, he composed for the piano. He also played piano. I think he mostly composed music for the piano. I think he has a couple of piano concertos, but most of his stuff was for solo piano.
Yeah, it's beautiful. If you've studied piano at all, if you've been a piano student, you've probably been assigned his pieces to play. Some are not so difficult, and then others are very difficult. I was telling Tom before we started, he was known as being a really good pianist himself, right? But his music isn't the hardest. The hardest is Liszt. His music was crazy, and they lived at the same time and knew each other.
So they were contemporaries.
They were. So we're going to talk about him. His music is often heard as just kind of background music if you're in a nice, expensive store or maybe expensive restaurant. They'll put Chopin on just to have this kind of romantic flavor or atmosphere wherever you are. We did talk about how he was one of the greatest musicians of the Romantic era. Art goes through different periods of time where you have different styles, and music and art typically would be at the same time, but they aren't always the same. The periods of time that people talk about aren't always exact. For the Romantic musical era, you could say it was around 1830 to 1900, but even then, some people believe it started a little earlier, ended a little later. It's not an exact science, really. But he was from the country of Poland, although he spent quite a bit of his life in Paris.
Indeed. So if you want to excel in the arts, in painting or in music, oftentimes the best place to go is Gay Paris. And born in Zelazowa Wola, Poland, Chopin displayed his remarkable music competence from a tender age, ultimately flourishing in Paris, where he spent the majority of his life. I'm not going to try to pronounce that name in Polish again. I probably slaughtered it terribly, so if you are Polish, please forgive me. But let's just say that he was born somewhere in Poland, and he had this remarkable musical ability or this competence when he was very young. So he displayed that musical competence from a tender age. So competence is your ability to do something. We often see this word in the opposite form. Incompetence. The mayor was not reelected because of his incompetence. He was unable to do a good job, so the voters did not re-elect him, as an example. But here, Chopin had some musical competence when he was very young. He had it starting from when he was young or from a tender age. Tender here just refers to something that is soft, but if you use it together with the word age, then you're talking about a young age.
Yeah, usually a child at a tender age. Before you're kind of tough and you get ready to go face the world, you're protected by your parents, more or less. So, yeah, he was very good, and he did grow up and started demonstrating that he had this amazing talent. Usually, if people are really good at something, you can see it when they're younger. Sometimes they're called a little genius at something, or they immediately show this amazing skill and talent. And then you hope that their parents will focus them so that they can really take advantage of that gift. So he ultimately spent a lot of time in Paris. That's where all the artists were. Whether you were a painter, a writer, or a musician, everyone went to Paris. And they would sit around and talk to each other and go on picnics and have an easy life that way. To flourish means to do very well, to develop very well. Maybe you have a child who is attending a new school, and her teacher or his teacher says, "Oh, they're flourishing. They're doing so well." That's a good thing. Or if you're talking about a garden or plant you're growing, if that garden is flourishing, it's very green and healthy and vibrant. So he did spend a lot of time in Paris, and that's where he was the majority of his life. I was telling Tom about a film I saw when I was much younger. I was in college, and it was a film about some composers. Liszt was in it, Chopin was in it, and of course their female friends, and it was just fun to see what it might have been like for people back then. It's an old film. If you're into old films, I would look it up. I can't remember the name. I'll try to find it while Tom's talking. But yeah, it was pretty cool. Now, after he moved to Paris, he composed extensively. If you do something extensively, you do it a lot, right? So if you extend your arm, you're moving your arm away from your body, out away from you. So to do something extensively just means you're doing it quite a bit. It's not just a simple hobby. You do it a lot.
We could say he was prolific, which means you produce a lot of works of art. Depending on what your field is. So he composed a lot of music, and he earned a prominent status in the city's musical scene. So because he had such great music and because he composed so much of it, because he composed extensively, well, lots of people respected him. He had a prominent status in the city's musical scene. They respected him. They wanted to talk to him. They wanted to invite him out for dinner. They went to see his performances, his recitals, or whatever. So indeed, he was quite significant in the city's music scene. And not only did Chopin's compositions convey poetic and expressive qualities, but the majority of them were also specifically crafted for solo piano performances. So in this sentence, we've got the not only pattern, not only, but also. So not only did his compositions convey poetic and expressive qualities, but they also were crafted for solo piano performances, which is pretty easy. If you're going to set up a concert, all you need to do is bring in a big piano and you're good to go. So yes, indeed, his compositions, the music he composed, had a lot of poetic qualities and expressive qualities. If you listen to music, you'll understand what that means. Solo here just means just one instrument. Solo piano music is composed by a lot of people. I think Mozart had his sonatas, and Beethoven did too, and Eric Satie. You get the idea.
Yeah, I just found the name of the movie, and I realized now why I liked it so much. The actors in this are great. Hugh Grant is the one who plays Chopin. And then Julian Sands, who was just discovered, he died.
Oh, no.
Sadly, he was hiking and they found his body. He was a great British actor as well. Emma Thompson's in it. Judy Davis, Mandy Patinkin, and Bernadette Peters. Maybe you guys don't know these names. These were the names of actors that I followed when I was in college. So, yeah, they're probably older at this point. So it's a fun film to see. It's called Impromptu. Impromptu is actually a name that we give to some of these types of compositions. Tom mentioned sonatas. Sonatas are big, right? They're played on a piano. Impromptu is also a type of music that he wrote himself. So he wrote some nocturnes, some etudes. Etude just means study. So if you see etude, you better prepare. It's usually a tougher piece to play. Nocturne is for the night, and it's slow and beautiful. Impromptus can be quite quick and fast. If you do something impromptu, you do something kind of spontaneously with not a lot of forethought or planning. If you have an impromptu picnic, you just say, hey, it looks nice today, let's go. So, yeah, it's a fun name for the film, though, because everything in it is all about artistry and artists. I really recommend it. It was made in 1991.
Ooh.
So it's quite old, but it's very good. It's a period drama film. There were a lot of those made at that period of film history, actually, especially from England. They did a lot of them.
Interesting. That movie came out about the time I got my first CD player, and I did buy several CDs by Chopin, by various pianists, and I think I still have them in my possession, although nobody really listens to CDs anymore. Well, we're going to continue with our all-English lecture in just a couple of seconds, but right now we're going to take a break, but stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, guys. It's our People unit, and we're focusing on a very famous composer from the Romantic era. His name is Frédéric Chopin, and he's written some really glorious music. I did learn to play a couple of his pieces as a young piano student, but the best way to listen to Chopin is to go get professional recordings of people who really know how to play the piano well. He was a very sensitive guy, he was in touch with his feelings, you could say. So a lot of his music is very expressive. And one of his pieces actually makes me cry when I listen to it. It's so beautiful. Some of his pieces are thoughtful. I would say most of them are more sad sounding, but he does have some upbeat songs as well. His impromptus are very upbeat.
Well, we did mention that his compositions convey poetic and expressive qualities, but again, most of them were crafted or composed for solo piano. And again, regarded as some of the most emotionally complex and technically demanding pieces ever written, these works genuinely distinguish Chopin from his contemporaries. So these are some reasons why his music is special. They're emotionally complex. They're very complicated, and they're technically demanding. They are quite difficult to play, and they genuinely distinguish him from his contemporaries, which again means people who were active at the same time. Like Liszt, as you said, they were contemporaries. They were working at the same time. Although Liszt is considered more technically complicated than Chopin, but still, it's not easy to play Chopin.
Yeah, he does have some easier pieces if you really want to work on your piano. So wonderful. So we're going to talk about one of his masterpieces. It's a very well-known piece. I think if you were to hear it, you would know immediately that you'd heard it before somewhere. The Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus, OP. The short abbreviation for opus, it just means a work in English. Opus 9, number 2. He often gave pieces numbers. He wrote a lot of things. Remember, we said he was kind of prolific. He composed extensively, so he had a lot of pieces, and he wrote very quickly. So a lot of the composers back then, they were brilliant, and they could write very quickly and have it done, and they'd be performing the next day. So a lot of the composers, too, I should mention, could play their own music. Not everybody. Beethoven didn't play his music, but a lot of them, at least in performances, a lot of them could not only compose, they would turn around and perform in public.
Right, and of course, one masterpiece that you've probably heard before and you hear every day if you take the MRT is the Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2, which goes like this. You get the idea. So if
it goes kind of high.
If you do take the green line, you'll hear that every time the train is about ready to pull into the station. And yes, indeed, that is quite common. It's probably the most common of his pieces, but he has other tunes you've probably heard as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they've heard this one.
Right, that's the one that plays on the MRT when the train is about ready to enter the station in the green line here in Taipei. And, of course, there are other nocturnes as well. And here it goes on to say, while the right hand weaves an exquisite tapestry of sound, it is complemented by the gentle accompaniment of the left. I don't really play the piano myself, but I get the idea that the right hand is kind of like the lead guitar. You know, it plays the lead melody, whereas the left hand is the rhythm guitar. It just plays the music that goes along with the melody.
It plays the chords more often. Yeah.
I guess so, the chords. So the right hand is weaving an exquisite tapestry of sound. Interesting description there.
It's pretty.
If something's exquisite, it's very beautiful, it's very detailed, it's very delicate. And a tapestry, of course, does refer to like a special piece of cloth that has a lot of different threads in it. And it's quite complicated, lots of pictures and designs in it. So a tapestry, in terms of music, would be, very complicated, very melodic melody.
Yeah, it's a beautiful description by our writer here. It is complemented by the gentle accompaniment of the left. So, yeah, the left hand's not quite as busy as the right. You could say that. There are some great videos online if you want to look at that. Complement here just means to go together well with something else. It doesn't mean compliment to say somebody like, oh, you're wearing a beautiful shirt today, or I love your dress, your hair looks great. That's spelled differently, compliment, with a P-L-I. This is P-L-E, compliment. And this just means to go together well. Yeah, sometimes you'll meet a couple and you'll think, oh, they really complement each other, don't they? They have different personalities, but they both fit together so well. Well, the right hand is a compliment to well, I guess it's complemented by the left hand. The left hand's just playing some of the chord structures, and it's not moving as quickly as the right hand. It's gentle, it's nice.
That makes sense because the right hand is usually easier to use than the left hand. So let the right hand have the lead there. And this charming nocturne establishes a calming atmosphere of reflection. Indeed, if you listen to it, you might be reflecting on your life. Gee, what have I been doing in my life? It was such a wonderful day today. While soaked in the style of the Romantic era, Chopin's compositions also exhibit nationalistic elements, with his Polish heritage profoundly influencing his music. So here, the music is soaked in the style of the Romantic era, and his compositions exhibit or they show nationalistic elements. Nationalistic means having to do with a nation or a country and your support of that country. So if you go to the United States and you see people wearing shirts with the American flag or an eagle on them, then they're very nationalistic. They are very patriotic. They love their country, and he loved his country, so he's got a lot of Polish elements in his music. I think he based a lot of his music on Polish folk tunes that he was familiar with since he's Polish. And yes, indeed, his heritage, his coming from Poland, profoundly influenced his music. You can hear Poland in his piano pieces.
You sure can. He has another type of composition that he has. It's called a polonaise. A polonaise just means a dance. So it's a slow dance. It comes from Poland. It's in triple time, like the waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And he wrote quite a few of those. And those turned into marches sometimes, so those are fun to listen to. Mazurkas is another type of composition again. And I only know these words from music, so I don't know if you're not a musician, would you know these words? I don't know. The mazurka is a lively Polish dance in triple time as well. So we've got the polonaise and the mazurkas that he wrote. In particular, these came from his Polish heritage. It's a rich history, and there's a lot of folk music that comes from Poland. So, yeah, Poland's been around a long time. They're very proud of their rich history. And that must be why we tell Polak jokes in America. I don't know.
Maybe, but my understanding is that Poland has been invaded by different countries throughout the centuries. And so when that happens, of course, the people experience hardship, and that gives them some subjects to write music about. So you can bet that Poland has some really great music.
Yeah.
Chopin is a good example of this. And yes, indeed, he got inspiration from the rich history of Poland. And of course, they've got lots of folk music there. And yes, indeed, these are some of the types of music he composes, the mazurkas and the polonaises. I don't think I've heard anybody else compose polonaises or mazurkas. So whenever you see mazurka or polonaise, you'll probably think of Chopin. And also, if you hear the word nocturne, you'll probably think of Chopin. But I think other composers had nocturnes. It's just Chopin's nocturnes are the most famous.
Yeah, other composers wrote nocturnes. So had it not been for his fragile health, Chopin might have achieved so much more in his career. Even from a young age, he had difficulties with his health. I think sometimes, especially back then, they didn't have great medicine. And, medicine and the knowledge of the body was very nation, it was just starting in. So they didn't have a lot of ways to figure out what was going on with someone, why they were sick. He seemed to just be sickly. And if you watch movies or TV shows that show the past, you'll often see characters that are described as sickly. And they're just kind of bedridden a lot. He was able to get around, and he did hang out with his friends. But in the movies, and I saw a TV show about him one time, they always show him as being kind of fragile, very frail. He wasn't very masculine. He was kind of thin. I just think his health wasn't very good. We know how he died, but we're not sure why he was sick at a young age.
Yes, indeed. He lived in the early part of the 1800s, and he died fairly young. And he might have achieved so much more in his career had he lived longer. Tragically, his life came to an early end at the age of 39 because of complications arising from tuberculosis. So this is tragic. Tragically, his life came to an end. It came to an early end, and he was only 39 years old. Just like Mozart, I think, was only in his 30s when he passed away as well. So here his life came to an early end. We can say that your life came to an end. You died. And in this particular case, his life came to an end at the age of 39 because he had tuberculosis, which is kind of a bacterial infection of your body, mainly in the lungs, okay? And if you've got complications, that means these are things that are happening as a result of tuberculosis. A couple years ago, we heard a lot about people dying from complications due to COVID. They didn't die directly from COVID, but they died because of complications. They died because of things that happened in their body as a result of being infected with the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, complications is often used to talk about medical problems that someone has after maybe a big major operation. Maybe they went in to have a surgery on their heart. And the surgery went really well, but maybe after that they got infected with some sort of bacteria and they died from complications from that. Rather than the surgery, they didn't die because their heart gave out. Something else went bad or went wrong. Or maybe you're working on a big project at work and you have a due date, but wow, things keep going wrong. You have all these complications, and so you aren't able to finish on time. So complications just means problems that occur when you're doing something else and you don't expect them. They aren't things you really can plan for. It just makes something more difficult, a complication. So these came, the reason why he had an early end to his life was because of the complications from tuberculosis. Tuberculosis killed a lot of people back then. It was very hard to heal them because we didn't have antibiotics back then, remember? They had not been discovered yet.
They hadn't even figured out what bacteria and viruses were.
True.
So nowadays, hopefully more people can live if they have tuberculosis. And even though he died, his musical legacy lives on. We can still listen to his music. We can buy CDs. We can download music from the internet. And he has been inspiring generations of musicians and music lovers ever since. In fact, I think when a lot of young people hear his piano pieces, they're probably inspired to take piano lessons. Mommy, I just heard this song in the department store. It was really good. I want to learn how to play the piano. Can I take lessons? I don't think that's what happened to you, but you can probably guess that a lot of people were inspired to take piano lessons because of Chopin.
Well, because my mom often listened to classical music, when I finally got these music books, and one book was just Chopin. So when I got it, I thought, oh, I've heard this before. If you've heard it before and then you're assigned that particular piece to practice, it's just a little bit more encouraging. It's hard to practice. A lot of kids hate to practice their instruments, whether it's a flute or a saxophone or the piano or violin. because when you're practicing, you don't sound very good.
Right.
And so you have to just keep going. Don't give up. Just keep moving ahead. But I think it is inspiring to be given a piece to learn that you've heard before. It's famous. And it kind of gives you a goal to reach, what it should sound like at least.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. And there's no Chinese teacher today because, of course, it's our all-English unit for the month of October. Hopefully you learned a lot, not only about English, but about Frédéric Chopin. From all of us here at English Digest, my name is Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.